you're gonna put me in a position where I forget again. The fifth one is nose breathing.
Okay.
I can't believe we didn't even go there. I was like, of course that has to be in there. I tell you what, talk about one of the most
breathing in general, but nose breathing with emphasis on nose breathing.
Maybe one of the most underrated ones. Man, I know. So I'm notorious for having a really hard time at night settling my brain down and going to sleep. It for some reason, and I'm sure I've trained myself this way to work long hours. And, because we talk about how important it is to get good rest, it's something that I'm always trying to put all these practices in place to improve that. But sometimes life happens. Sometimes it's a very stressful, long day and, a lot's on my mind, or I got bombarded with multiple things. And so it really challenges those practices that I've tried to put in place, and some of them are uncontrollable. Like I was still working till 11 o'clock at night, and I had nothing I could do about it. Yeah. And my saving grace is the nose breathing or box breathing is what I use before I go to bed. And and Katrina and I will actually do it together. And she believes that she can hear me thinking. Like we'll be laying in bed, and like I won't even say anything. We'll have been there for probably 20 minutes, and I'll get like an elbow. Stop it! I can hear you. She'll do that to me.
She's sensitive. I believe it.
Yeah. And then she'll do that to me, and then if it's bothering her so much that it's ruining her sleep, she'll say, "Breathe with me," and then we'll breathe together. And I swear to God, man, it's wild how powerful that can be and how impactful it can be.
Well, not breathing through the nose changes the structure of your face and your nose. They actually have shown this. They've done studies where people will purposely block their nose, and the structure of the jaw, the mouth, and the nose actually change. So people with deviated septums, for example, who can't breathe and then they get it fixed, it's life-changing for them. And if you look at pictures of them after the procedure, you see some structural changes to the face. Yep. I just learned this recently. It's really crazy.
That's why you can tell, if you want to go just completely superficial, I don't care about any scientific stuff, chicks will be more attracted to a guy with a chiseled jawline. Why is that? It's an indication that biologically speaking, that's a high-functioning male that could provide. They're probably more testosteronic, and they've probably got better sperm count, and it's like a Tesla versus like an old Civic. So the old Civic guy is the person with the receding chin, and they're kind of a little bit kind of just like soft, and all of those things. It's like nothing wrong, nothing right, no moralistic judgment, anything like that. But there's a difference between a Tesla and a 15-year-old Civic. And the Tesla, you get in it, you're like, whoa, what was that? It's like, oh, well, the mechanics are pretty on point. Everything is sharp. And so when you're breathing through the nose, a lot of things will happen. One, naturally, if you want to get into kind of more of like an Eastern type perspective, you're connecting the tongue naturally to the roof of the mouth. So if you wanted to get weird, you could say you're completing the microcosmic orbit, and so getting into like meridians and all that stuff. It's like connecting this energy channel, goes all the way up top of the head, all the way down to the front, down the perineum, and up the back. And I don't know. I think from for just mechanical, again, nuts and bolts, like lifting heavy stuff perspective, you can get more strength out of that. Calling a thing a microcosmic orbit immediately puts me into like a tinfoil hat kind of like woo category. Yeah. But it is interesting. It just so happens that East and West cross the intersection
a lot.
Yeah. A lot. I don't know if all the time, but I think if you give it enough time, it's pretty close to all the time.
It's wisdom. It's all wisdom, and there's truths in all of them. And sometimes they say it differently, but they're saying the same thing oftentimes. And there's different approaches. And I think it's a huge disservice to yourself to just stick to one, just like with exercise. I'm only going to do this one method, and I'm going to ignore all these others. Huge disservice.
And so with more facial structure stuff, so your facial muscles will naturally be kind of pulling you in. So when you are closing your jaw and you're going through and you're breathing with the nose, especially like growing up as a baby, if you just kind of allow that just like slack jaw, you'll literally start to cave in on yourself. Like you need to create some internal pressure. You need to push out in order to grow into a strong body. And so that person that's continually just slack jaw, breathing through their mouth, they're missing out on filtering the air. They're missing out on changing the temperature of the air to be more ready to be actually assimilated. They're missing out on the production of nitric oxide. So now they're missing out on cardiovascular function. Now they're missing out coming back to picking up chicks if that's what you're interested in, if you're a guy. Well, now ED, erectile dysfunction. If I'm going to go out and get a supplement, maybe I'll go get beet juice or something in order to increase nitric oxides. Well, you realize that you naturally, just through tapping into your own innate mechanics, you can produce this stuff just by walking through a room and breathing right.
See, now you're selling it. I love it. Yeah. You want boners? Breathe through your nose.
Dude, seriously, all that stuff is legit. It all comes back to evolution, man.
Totally.
Everything that we're doing, it all comes back to a bunch of animals trying to figure this thing out. We're trying to eat. We're trying to get laid. We're trying to create shelter. We're trying to perpetuate the species.
And because we're so complex, a big part of that is trying to find purpose and meaning. Because without that, it's too big of a struggle for smart apes like us.
What a weird time.
Yeah, I know. I know, right? Back to Russia and reptiles.
Talk about coronavirus. Yeah.
Don't you dare.
Yeah. Hey, listen, you're always a good time, dude.
Yeah.
You're always a great time, man.
Yeah. Hopefully you feel like we like you, right? You don't get the vibe that we don't like.
Feels like Tata Tuesday.
Yeah.
We're not having sex.
Okay.
We're not going to have
not this time.
Sex. It's a pandemic. We got to maintain distance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we could do what Canada recommended. See what Canada had this recommendation for sex. And they actually advocated for glory holes.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Bold move, Canada.
Yeah, because of the pandemic. Hey, if you want to bang somebody, just do it through a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
That'll keep you safe.
Damn.
Yeah, no, isn't that funny?
I saw wearing masks during coitus. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I don't understand. Yeah,
there was a time when condoms weren't a thing, and then the HIV came out, and that's like, oh, now it's the next level.
Pretty soon we'll just be
full body
robot banging.
Well, perhaps this gets into like Elon Musk simulation stuff. We'll be sitting inside of a tube someplace, plugged up to nutrients, while we're like leading digital lives.
Do you think
that's the only safe way to do it?
Do you think
you don't want your actual biological body to go out there? You could die.
Yeah.
Do your digital.
I think
body.
we will quickly realize we don't really know what we need. I think we're going to give ourselves everything we ever wanted and desired, and be extremely depressed.
Aaron, are you a sci-fi guy? Do you watch sci-fi stuff?
Not enough. I'd be more creative if I was.
Well, no, I'm just interested if you think there's a movie that's out there that depicts our future the best.
Idiocracy.
Oh man, yeah.
I haven't seen that.
You haven't seen that?
What?
No.
Oh, dude.
Oh, yeah.
This guy. So I saw this a long time ago, but
it's an old movie.
He gets frozen or whatever,
Yeah.
and he's reanimated or whatever in the future, and this like pro wrestler is president. And dumb people were having more kids than smart people. Yeah. Anyway, everything went backwards, and everybody's really dumb, and they don't drink water. They drink this soda because that's full of electrolytes, and they feed it to their plants.
Yeah.
It's a comedy. It's a comedy.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna have to
painfully accurate.
And he's a normal dude. He's an average dude, but because the future gets so stupid, he's like the smartest man in the world. Yep. When they bring him back.
Just because he's an average
I can't believe
guy.
I've never seen this or even heard of this before. Yeah. I've got to watch it.
You got to watch it.
I thought Surrogates to me with Bruce Willis, I feel like is very close to where we're heading. I believe
Matrix is another.
Yeah, right. Those are kind of very similar, right? That we're going to be plugged in. I think there's going to be a clear division of humans in the future.
They live. That's what I think.
There's going to be the plugged in and then the unplugged people. I think we're smart enough, and there's enough of us that see the writing on the wall, and that I think if it keeps going crazier and crazier that direction, that I think we'll revolt and go the other direction. But I do think there will be a mass majority that will fall in line.
I think 100% our own arrogance is going to be our downfall. We're so smart. We give ourselves everything we think we want. We can satisfy every pleasure, which is going to start to get closer and closer to that. And then we're going to realize this is not. It's like that scene in The Matrix when they capture what's his name, Morpheus, and Agent Smith, is that his name?
Yeah,
Agent Smith is talking to him, and he says, in the beginning, the first Matrix was a utopia for humans. We made it perfect, and your feeble mind couldn't perceive that things could be so good, and we lost entire crops of humans.
We rejected it.
They had to remake the Matrix with all the challenges of real life in the 90s or whatever at the time because humans can't live in a we don't know what utopia is. We think we know, and we would create it if we could digitally.
We'd be too bored with perfection.
Not just that, just no meaning and purpose of things. Imagine if you could this is when people ask us this question all the time. What if there was a pill that made you fit, lean, and healthy? Like, would that be the answer? And I'm like, well, no, because most of the benefits you get from eating right and exercising is the pursuit of doing so. It's not it's not the result of it. It's the pursuit of it. That's
Well,
where
we
you
have.
get all-
I think we see examples of this with the uber rich all the time. I mean, I feel like I see
or celebrities.
Yeah, like where I feel like there's more uber rich or celebrity people that look depressed, sad, or have so much pain and sorrow in their life than I think of that. Like, oh man, they look really happy, or they really like got it all together. So, and yet they have the ability to pretty much buy or have anything that this earth has to offer.
Do you know Daniel Everett? Don't Sleep, There Are Snakes. Have you ever heard of that book?
No.
The Paraha people in the Amazon.
No.
I said the Amazon, so it's just one country. I think it was Brazilian Amazon. I'm not sure. But what he found in studying these Paraha people, he went out there as a Christian missionary, and so his intention was to go and convert them over and get them Bibles and the whole thing. And he went out there kind of with his own version of like resting bitch face. And the Paraha people, they documented the amount. Yeah, there's the book. They documented the amount that they smile to determine like level of happiness. It's kind of a weird thing whenever you see like,
oh, I've heard somebody reference this before.
Whatever university is the happiest place in the world. It's like, how do you figure that out? Who takes surveys? Like, what is it?
Yeah.
But so the way that they documented was literally just measuring the amount of time that they're smiling throughout the day, and comparing it to all other cultures that they compared it to. These Paraha people apparently were the most smiliest people. And what was interesting with that is they don't have any of their language structure, and their belief systems are completely different than that of modern hyper analytical aggregate stuff, quantity. And so they don't even have any numbers. They don't have any sense of history beyond their life. So if you tell me about Jesus, I'm like, is this your brother? Is this your, like, give me more details. And they're like, oh no, this is a guy 2,000 years ago. They're like, 2,000, what does that even mean? What are you talking about?
So they didn't even have a conception of that.
You know who talked about that? Justin, who went over to the Congo. And he talked about their perceived happiness within their community with having like nothing.
Nothing.
Like they had like one pair of clothes, a pair of sandals. And
We're like, I don't know enough about computers to deem whether this is an appropriate analogy, but I think we're like computers in the sense that we only have so much bandwidth. And so if you offer the majority of the bandwidth out to material, unanchored shit, then that's where your energy goes. And so if that's where you're thinking, that's where your mind is occupied, and now all of a sudden, well, I have evidence. I've got 2 Lambos. I got the new Lambo SUV, dog. I'm coming up. And now it's like, oh, it's like, that's me. It's like, no. So if you don't have any of that, you don't even have the opportunity to make that you. You don't have any opportunity to identify with that.
Right.
And so if you don't have the opportunity to identify with that, it's like, what do I have around? It's like, well, I have
people.
I have my body. I have my friends.
Right. I have this
my kids.
This cool stick that I made, right?
Wow, I have this food. Wow, it's not amazing. It's not, comparison to like if I was like Paris Hilton, but it's like
But you don't even have that comparison though. That's all you know.
Right. But if it's like, if that's what you have, it's like the 5 movement principles. It's like break it down to like simplistic, like what do I have in front of me? If you have less, it makes it easier for you to actually pay attention to the things that matter, because those are intrinsically with you.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we live in these modern market-based societies, and markets do one thing better than any other system. They give us what we want, and they innovate very, very well. What's the weakness in that? It's what we want.
Yeah.
And we don't know what we need. We only know what we want. And what I want right now is pleasure, distraction, entertainment, good tasting, hedonistic value of the food, and I don't want to move. So you're going to get a lot of that, and it's not really what you need. I think sometimes when you're forced in a situation, then you start to really, realize things.
The thing is, it's no one's fault. So I think it's really easy to like shit on modernity and shit on Western culture. It's like, oh, like these guys, and they don't.
It's a learning. It's learning.
Yeah, and so, but if you think about the amount of commercials that you're exposed to, I think it's something like by the age 30, you're exposed to something like 20 million commercials or some ridiculous number. Your whole life, since you're a little person, and then also multiply that times, your parents' perspectives and the world that they grew up and all the commercials they've been exposed to, it's literally all of those commercials are selling you the idea that you will be enough, you will be loved, you will be supported, you will be all of the things when you have our shit. And so literally, like your software system, unless you choose to actively unlearn it, you need to go out of your way to actively unlearn it. is such that I will be whatever, enough when I make this money and buy that thing.
Dude, I had such a mind-blowing paradigm shift a while ago, and I'm going through it now. So my wife's pregnant, right? She's in the third trimester of pregnancy. And a while ago on the podcast, I have very minimal knowledge of natural childbirth and the history of it. My knowledge at the time was what I had heard. And I remember on the podcast I said, oh yeah, childbirth is so dangerous, #1 cause of death in women throughout all of history. Thank God for modern medicine and blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, I got a message from a midwife who was like, you're so wrong, and that's not how it works. And, she's obviously an expert, and I went back and forth with her and debated and discussed, and she got me to the point where I became open-minded, and I said, well, okay, this is interesting. Then I started learning more about the natural childbirth process, and I started to see that the way that we treat childbirth in Western societies is the way we treat everything with Western medicine, which it's a medical emergency, because that's what Western medicine does really well. You cannot compare with Western medicine for dealing with medical emergencies. There is no system that's better at that, but like anything you're really good at, if you are a hammer, everything's a nail, right? So that's how they treat it, and you see it in movies. This is how I was conditioned. Oh my God, the woman, water broke. Rush to the hospital. My wife's pregnant. What's gonna happen? She gets to the hospital, and then the muscles of the cervix are like sphincters, and like any sphincter muscle, it ain't gonna relax unless you're relaxed, and your body's not gonna have this baby unless your body feels safe, right? And so we have this cascading event of interventions with, oh, you're not moving fast enough. Here's this chemical called Pitocin. Oh, now it really hurts. We got to give you an epidural. Oh, you can't have the baby? Let's do a C-section. And so I started learning about this. So now we're in this process of we're going to be doing, childbirth with a midwife. I've learned about natural childbirth. I'm taking these courses, and it's so interesting. I didn't know this, right? This is something that happens sometimes with women, right? They go through the process of natural childbirth, and when there's different stages of it. And once they start to get to the last stage, which is the most intense and things are really happening, sometimes the body will stop for about 30 minutes to an hour. They'll just stop. And the midwives say, oh yeah, the body knows you need a break. It'll just stop. Doesn't mean you're not having the baby. It gives you time to get your energy back, because the next phase is the baby's going to come out. Then the other thing they said was, don't worry about pushing. You will push. It just happens naturally. They said something to me which was like, well, duh. If you knew nothing about childbirth, your body would have this baby. Yeah. It's going to happen. You don't need to know anything, and there's a lot of instinct and natural things that happen, and we've countered it so much that we've created something entirely different. It reminded me of that when we're talking about that we go counter to what's natural for ourselves so much that we're causing ourselves a lot of problem. And it's everything from how much stuff we have, all the stuff we think that's going to make us happy, when in reality, a lot of what makes you happy is your mindset, what's within you, how you perceive things, and people. People is what really makes people happy. In fact, it's
people that care about you for more than the shit that you've worn on your sleeve.
Right. Good people.
And once again, it is. I like the idea of taking full responsibility for everything, and also at the same time saying, okay, it's not my fault because I'm just a part of this algorithm and the environment formed me and all that. But your friends, the people that you have around you, that you created them. So by you leading with, oh, like me because I have this sweet car, like me because I have this, like me because I have that. Like
that's the people you'll have.
I mean, welcome to LA. LA's.
Yeah, how the hell do you live in LA? By the way,
you're so opposite of LA.
I needed.
You got to be a fish out of water.
I went to LA because I, come from like nature, stony meccas around. So I lived in Boulder, Colorado, and then Bend, Oregon, and Hawaii for a while, and did a bunch of traveling in between that. And I felt as though the way that I describe LA is like an oven. So you go to the other places in the world and you gather your ingredients and you make a pizza. And so you put it and you get it all sorted out, and it's a nice circle, and you got the pepperonis or whatever, maybe it's vegan. And then at some point,
gotta be politically correct.
Exactly.
There's the LA coming in.
Yeah. I'm afraid. I'm withdrawn.
I picked up on that right there. It could be vegan. Could be vegan.
Totally.
Don't judge me.
Plant-based pepperoni.
But at some point, my sensation, which may or may not have been accurate, was like I need to put the pizza into the oven. And so, I drove my car down to the oven, And I've been there for the last 4 years, and now I have the book, and I have the online program, and the podcast has grown.
Don't leave the pizza in there too long.
I was going to say,
but you don't want to leave the pizza in too long. And so now I'm planning on moving to Texas, Austin, Texas, for a short amount of time.
California is losing everybody. I swear to God,
dude, it's nothing but for lease signs. Like around my neighborhood, like every block, it's just like for lease. It's almost
down there. Right?
It's like sad and almost like an interesting game in a way. When I see another for lease sign, I get this weird dopamine hit. I'm like, whoa, another one! Wow, because I'm not a landowner in LA, so I'm like, whatever. And I own a place in a more rural setting in Bend, Oregon. So my individualistic perspective is like, as people surge out of these places, they're going to go to like nicer, more rural type spots.
So Aaron, you living in the secular capital of the world, next to probably Vegas, right? Do you feel there is a healthy balance of some of these things, right? You alluded to the Lamborghini, and Sal's alluded to us chasing pleasure and getting things for the hedonistic value. Can we be in pursuit of growth and being a healthy person, and also find ways to allow some of those things to come into your life, or is it all bad?
I think it comes back to the same response: is, are you consumed by the game, or are you able to have like more of a witness role of the game?
Right.
If you're in that position, it doesn't matter what you do, in my opinion, because you're not consumed by it. You could be consumed by any game. If you think that all you are is, there's some games that would probably be better if all you are is a father, or all you are is this or that. But even within that, you can step back and observe and say, oh, wow, I'm playing this human game here. And so I think that it's like religion. It's like, because you were raised in this specific culture with this specific book, in my perception, it doesn't mean that book is true. It's just the one that you happen to have been dropped into. So within that religion, are you able to gather the tools and the benefits from that religion or from that perspective or city or whatever, but not just identify entirely with it, because you're not that.
I think the person, depending on how healthy they are, and I mean that in the full sense, that's what determines the things that they chase and the things that they want. So in the sense, what you're saying is true. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but who you are changes what you're doing. And you won't be doing certain things.
It's chicken or the egg.
Right.
It goes back to the same thing.
Some
mind,
things,
body,
so,
body,
right?
mind.
I subscribe to what you're talking about, Aaron. I really feel like that it comes back to the awareness thing, right? You keep alluding to the witness thing. I think of that as just self-awareness. Is that I'm aware that this is a materialistic thing. Mm-hmm. I'm aware that it is not me. It doesn't make me anything. But I can also say, like, boy, is it fucking fun to drive.
Fuck yeah.
Boy, is it cool how it corners. You know what I'm saying?
I think, be LeBron James. Just don't drink your LeBron James Kool-Aid. Like, do everything you can to play that game well.
Yeah. And
realize that this is just that.
Right.
And then from there, I have got no hate for the player. It's like, it's like, damn, he plays the game well.
Right.
That's great.
Right.
But does he think that he is that shoe moving around the board?
Right.
To use Monopoly.
Right.
It's like, do you really think you're the shoe? It's like, yeah, I'm the shoe because I'm winning.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you lose hard and you're like, I'm not this shoe. And you go through some form of existential crisis where you have to analyze yourself deeper. And now maybe all of a sudden you become, born again, something.
Right.
You start to really come out and say, God, I was never the shoe. It was bigger than this. I needed some figure up. Maybe I choose to elect it, some figure in space, some God figure, whatever it may be. Like, that's the leader. It's taking me home. But before, I thought I was the shoe my whole life because I was winning the game.
Not even realizing you're the sock within the shoe.
Hey, it's interesting, and I don't, whether you subscribe to a religion or you speak it like universe, it's pretty wild how that lesson is taught. It will be taught at one point.
Oh yeah,
it's
physics.
It's spiritual wisdom.
Yeah,
it's spiritual physics. I think it's like there's a science to it. It's the same way that people are built up in culture to be torn down. You get to a certain level where all of a sudden it's like, wow. There's a handful of comedians right now that I'm one of which I'm fairly close with, it's going through kind of like all the stuff of like Me Too and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting thing to watch the development, watch as they grow. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now you're in position. The tree is so much taller. You could see it from miles away. Now there's something scientific about it. Of all the rest of the nodes, I think we'll have the tendency of like, how can we chop that thing back down? Because if that's down, then I'm up. And it's like there's some equilibrium thing that happens with it. And so we seek out to be at that point. And then eventually some people play the game well enough that they arrive at that point. And then very often they resent that point.
See, I find it interesting that science wants to prove it, that it's some physiological thing that happens, or that we can break it down scientifically, and then spiritually we want to just attribute it all to God. There's got to be something there, and I feel like no matter which one you subscribe to, it's a religion.
Everything is.
Right.
Science is one of the biggest religions.
Well, scientism is a very dangerous, obviously, religion. It lacks morality. It's purely objective.
Right, you become computer.
Well, it doesn't ask, should I? It always says, can I?
Right.
Oh, let me see. Yeah, it's not a should, Let's see if we can. That's always the question. I think you have to look at different lenses to understand different types of wisdom. It doesn't make sense to use science to understand art or poetry. It doesn't make sense to use...
We sure try to, though.
We do. It doesn't make sense to use religion to understand science. Religion and spirituality has its own wisdom. And they're all, look, if you believe in evolution, you have to believe in the evolution of ideas. And if things stick around a long time, it's because it's probably valuable.
Yeah.
There's probably some wisdom in there. If something's been around for a long time, don't just throw it out. Ask yourself, why have people found this particular thing valuable for as long as they have? Because it's gone through a lot of different people who, and combining them all is definitely going to be smarter than you. Find the wisdom with that. Don't just cut it out.
Yeah, on all that, I think it comes back to like the same thing. Ancient wisdom, having polarities, yin and yang, and light and dark, and sun and moon, east, west, science, whatever the other ism is, scientism, and whatever other ism that's more like a holistic, more artistic, more, expressive. So you said it with, if we never were instructed how to deliver a baby, we would naturally figure it out, obviously. And so it's one of those things where it's like we have the scientific flashlight from a Western person that grows up indoctrinated into the world that we have. It feels comforting to be able to come back and say, don't worry, everything's been defined, everything's been measured. We have a scientific term for that.
There's that arrogance,
Yeah, it's like, don't worry, we understand. We've put the definition on it. We got the DSM. You've got the ADHD. And you're like, oh, okay, I got the ADHD. Great.
Don't worry, we got a drug for that.
Great. You got a drug? Okay, cool. Okay, good. We're good. And then beyond that, it's like, so that's the more scientific realm. It's great. I'm glad that we have pharmaceutical drugs. I'm glad that we have surgery. I'm glad that we have all of that stuff. Behind that, it's like, well, how do you define and confine and delineate, say someone playing a violin that's making people weep in a subway in Paris? Like, what's the science there? It's like, well, you see that the song, it struck some chord in the amygdala, and it's just like, shut the fuck up. Listen to the song.
Doesn't need definition.
No. You're not going to solve. You're not going to solve spiritual illness with medicine, just like you're not going to solve a bacterial infection with art or whatever.
And that's when the science mind can become judgmental of that same person we referenced before that went to Peru and did the ayahuasca journey and all that stuff. But there's a lot of missing pieces that science hasn't completely classified yet. But perhaps in 5 years, maybe we might create some definitions for that.
Interesting book, Derek Thompson's Hitmakers. Have you read that before?
No.
Oh, so that you'll appreciate that for this conversation. We're talking about the science of art and music, and that book makes the case for that. Yeah. Read it. It's an interesting read. I mean, it contradicts what we're saying and what we believe, but they believe that you can scientifically break down all that.
I think everything. I describe science as, it's like you're in a car and you're driving down a dusty road, and your experience in the car just mobbing down and switching gears, that's art. And you're just in the moment, you're feeling it, and you're like, I hit the jump and whatever, maybe a power slide, whew, you know, and then behind that artistic expression that just felt authentically, it was like I was like moved by something. It just came out. I don't even know how to explain it. Behind that, once the dust starts to settle with time, you can have the scientists and the nerds coming up behind. Nothing against nerd, I mean nerd in an endearing way. They come up behind and they're analyzing the tire tracks and they're analyzing the type of rubber that was used, and and it's this very dry, sterile, kind of definitive, okay, this is what happened. We've got it. You put it into the books. It's like, hey, we have some science about that rad experience.
It reminds me of trying to break down flow state, right? Like that's how it is. Like when you have athletes and people that have been doing this for, you know, decades and probably centuries of, you know, doing things, and they've been able to just drop into that without thinking about anything. And now we're trying to pick it apart and figure out how do we formulate this?
But the person in the car, it would be very easy for them to be like, you know, just right off the nerd brigade falling behind and be like, they don't know anything, you know, they're not even in the experience.
Yeah.
You know, and then the nerd brigade could be looking at the people in the car and they're like, they don't even understand the type of rubber in their tire. Like they don't know anything about this experience.
Yeah.
It's like they're looking at almost it's like two different languages describing the same thing. And then they're having wars about it. It's like, what if we just team up? And then, you know, I think that's how people.
That reminds me of the potential consequences that I feel I see when I go to like a live sporting event now. And, you know, because I've been watching live sports for a very long time, I've watched this crazy evolution in the last like decade of where you saw none of this before. And then I watched a little bit of it and then more and more of it. Then the majority of it now, like everybody, when you're at like a live concert or a live game, has gone from being in the moment, feeling the music, feeling the game, and being so into the environment to caring more about recording it through your phone so you could post it and share it on Instagram.
They're watching the whole thing through their phone.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I always think about like what are the unintended consequences of that? Like will they experience less joy because of that, or will they never get the fullest feeling of what that is like being almost one with that moment because they are so concerned about sharing that with others?
It's just they're just in a different medium. You know, their medium, as opposed to being absorbed by the sound and being with the people and all that, their medium is capture. I want to capture. And I'm looking into the screen, and, you know, even inherently looking into the screen as opposed to utilizing panoramic vision. You know, your eyes are an extension of your brain. And the way that you use your vision, if you're narrowing in your focus, that goes back into, you know, say I'm pulling a bow back and I'm focusing all my energy into that one prey that's out there. I get my proper cocktail of cortisol and stress hormones, and I'm really focusing like a shark. Versus, say I take in the whole panoramic vision, which is Andrew Huberman, Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's like he reviewed my whole chapter about this, thankfully, because I had all sorts of errors, and he was like, this is how it actually should be written. And so he's a researcher up in Stanford, Stanford's like right beside here, huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's back and forth through here. Have you done a podcast with him?
No.
Okay. It would be really great for you guys to have him.
Cool.
On.
Introduce us.
He's like one of the smartest humans, and his perception of the way that our visual muscles inform our autonomic nervous system is brilliant. You know, and so when you go into taking in that panoramic view of the whole entire, you know, you're watching all the crowd, and you're watching, maybe it's an outdoor concert and clouds or all that, it literally informs the nervous system that you're in a more open, flow, calm, receptive place. When you narrow your vision in, you organize your nervous system to more executive function, get shit done. I'm here to capture.
Oh, that's interesting, because do you remember when we theorized about this, Sal? We talked about this on the podcast about the experience you have when you go somewhere like Yosemite.
Changes you.
And you have this kind of, why do we all have this breathtaking moment? It's just rocks and trees and sky.
Yeah, you can look at it in a picture.
Right, but exactly. But why when you go there? And we theorized that it had something to do with really at that moment recognizing how small you are in comparison to something so
The
grand.
scale is overwhelming.
But what you're saying is a little bit different than that. That's very interesting.
It's both.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So first it puts you into a place of receptivity, and then that allows those thoughts to start to kind of stir up in that cauldron. But first you need to be in a receptive place. So if you were just watching Yosemite on a screen, you're seeing the same image, but it's not nearly going to hit you in that visceral way. And that's because literally it's like you first are opening the container through those visual muscles / everything else. It sounds, you're being enlivened, you know. And so in our modern day, where you're taking all of those potential, have you guys hunted ever?
I have when I was younger.
So I went bow hunting for the first time last summer in Maui, Hawaii. And as I was out there, it's this insane sensation, like literally, like all the cliche things, like feeling like more alive than I ever had and all that stuff. It was quite true because I was being forced to have this sense of sound and wind and, you know, everything like behind me to the left. I was measuring distances. Okay, cool. Like that bush is 20 yards and, you know, taking my rangefinder, that bush is 30 yards, that bush is 50 yards. You know, so I'm literally like, just by me just posting up here, I'm enlivening my brain. It's like an electrical storm inside my mind to be able to cast a net in my environment and like become the environment. Whereas when you just put all of that information of that moment into some like bow hunting special on TNT, you're like you're kind of dying in a way.
Wow.
If the reference point, the other side of the spectrum, was becoming enlivened by your environment,
right?
I think capturing all of that, putting it into a screen, and calling that your life, I think that would, you know, be kind of the opposite.
Always an interesting time hanging out with you, dude.
Yeah, thanks for coming, bro.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's always a good time. How long are you in the area for?
I don't know, a few more hours. I flew out here just for this.
Yeah. Oh, hey, that's great.
I was trying to double it up with I'm coming up here again in like 3 days, and I've been trying to stay with my word. I think that's a very important thing.
It is.
And so
we appreciate it.
And so I think in general it's a huge deal. That gets into.
So now you're going back to the oven?
Yeah. Well, I leave the oven.
Don't burn your vegan pizza.
So here's the plan. Hopefully we can come back and do another podcast, assuming this plan goes through, because I'll have stories. And I'd love to have you guys back on mine and all that stuff. I'll probably co-release this if you guys permit it or something.
No, let's do that.
We'll figure it out. But the plan next spring would be to have a whole bag of new stories, because this winter, the plan, world permitting, is to go out to Papua New Guinea and Tanzania and Sri Lanka and all sorts of places that people have been kind of living the way they've been living for lots of years, and be able to have a more real, visceral, anthropological perspective of what the hell has been going on in our bodies for thousands of years. And then that would be the beginnings of book number 2.
Oh, I'm excited for that, dude.
Right on.
I hope, world permitting. We'll see what the heck's happening in the world.
I know.
But I appreciate you guys so much having me here.
Thanks, brother.
This is the first
interview since
physical interview.
We haven't had anybody here since the pandemic started. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How is that? I know we need to wrap up. How has that affected you guys not having in person versus doing remote?
Well, luckily for us, our podcast episodes with just us do the best, and we have each other, so we're able to build this brand.
Interviews haven't been as good,
right? Typically, right? We have some interviews that do very, very well, and we enjoy it. I love meeting people, but it hasn't hurt us business wise. From a personal perspective, I like being around people, and it does suck that it's the way things are right now, and it's a bit difficult to work through. But yeah, we're open back up. We started with you.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Honored to be here. I really appreciate spending time with you guys.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you. Great way to progressively overload in a time when people or weights are scarce.
Totally.
Yeah. It's hard. So many people are having a hard time getting plates or getting weights. It's like we always, I think that's like the default. And that's, trainers are just as guilty. I am too. Of like when I first started training, like you always just think like more reps, more sets, or more weight. Mm-hmm. Like this is how, like, we're going to get better. We're going to keep